Hey guys, very interesting video today. There's this channel that makes a lot of really, how do I say this, low IQ videos. And here's one where we're going to talk about regarding the pandemic and the science around the vaccine. Warning, it's a little bit triggering because this girl talks as if she knows it all and the smug look on her face can be a little annoying.
Hello, fellow lab rats, and happy Roniversary!
Okay, we're going to cut a bit of the video here because she spends a good 30 seconds trying too hard to be funny.
At this time last year, we were all in this together, and now we're literally re-establishing Jim Crow laws. And I'm not even being facetious. I'm actually seeing people champion the idea of vaccinated-only dining hours and completely anti-vaxxer-free establishments.
I've never heard of that, but I'm not totally against the idea. I mean, these are private businesses, right? They can do whatever the fuck they want. But even if there were public spaces where only vaccinated people were allowed, it honestly wouldn't be the worst idea. It'd be a good way to allow as many people as possible to be outside while keeping the risk low. It would also incentivize people to actually get the vaccine. The only real problem would be how to identify who has actually gotten vaccinated. That would be a whole issue by itself. But yeah, not against it, and it's not like it would last a long time either, just until herd immunity is reached.
Fun fact, did you know that 49% of the Canadian population does not want this vaccine?
It seems you didn't really read the header there correctly because it says they're less likely to get the vaccine, not that they don't want the vaccine. Canada has been known to be somewhat slow in their vaccine rollout, so many people who wanted to get the vaccine may not get it until months later than expected. I have a friend in Canada who works in a hospital, and as of the recording of this video, he only just got the first dose. So yeah, no doubt that Canada is lagging behind. Please don't incorrectly use this to falsely inform your audience that Canadians don't want the vaccine. Not many people are as stupid as you are.
And that the population least likely to get it is black people?
Oh geez, I wonder why black people are less likely to get the vaccine. They have been vaccinated at a lower rate. This isn't just in Canada, but even in the United States it's the same situation, where they are vaccinated at half or even a third of the rate. Even in the face of a pandemic where we should all be working together as a team, black people are still getting the short end of the stick. And again, I must stress, it's not because they don't want the vaccine. Your twist on this report is making me sick.
You see, these people can't be trusted because their actions and opinions have no moral foundation. One minute they're crying about kids locked up in cages, and the next minute they're locking their own kids up in the basement.
You're actually so dumb if you think these two are even remotely the same. Tearing families apart at the border and putting kids in cages is completely different than just putting your kid in the basement for 14 days. Yeah, personally I think the latter is not always the best option, but if you have an old grandma in the house who is very susceptible, then yeah, it's somewhat understandable. This is by no means hypocrisy because these two situations are completely different. Not to mention that you can't use one person's actions to represent a whole group of people. Nice try though.
One minute they're chanting, "My body, my choice," and the next minute they're publicly shaming anyone who refuses to be a big pharma guinea pig.
Whenever you think of one of those moments you think is hypocritical, stop and think first. What are the differences between these two situations? Because if you do that, you'd probably save yourself a lot of embarrassment. So let's apply that logic here. When you get an abortion, who are you impacting? Yourself, maybe your partner. Oh, and a bundle of cells that has no consciousness or awareness whatsoever. Alright, let's think about vaccinations now. Who are you affecting if you are offered a shot and you choose not to get it? Everyone. Everyone around you that you come into contact with. It's the same with masks. For a pandemic like this, your actions don't only affect yourself or just the people close to you. You have the potential to impact everyone in your local population, either directly or indirectly. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you choose just to screw only yourself over, nobody would complain about that. But if your actions are going to further the spread of a novel virus, then yes, you're an asshole.
They've been programmed to regurgitate whatever meaningless political statement is trending at the time, as long as it fits neatly onto a blush pink Instagram highlight.
Haha, very funny. No, we follow what the science says. Of course I would listen to people who have spent their entire lives working in the field of science. So when science says to wear a mask or to get your vaccine, you bet I'm going to do that. And I'm a scientist myself. I work in clinical trials and producing new treatments for multiple different studies, one of which is COVID. And among the scientific community, the consensus is clear in that you should be social distancing, wearing a mask, getting your vaccine, and doing anything in your power to slow down the spread. It's just that simple. People like you with power on the internet annoy me the most, spewing anti-scientific nonsense on the internet while sitting behind a computer that science built using Wi-Fi that science has given you, and probably have at some point taken medication of some sort that biologists and doctors prescribe to you. Now that is true hypocrisy.
These are the same people who are going to be cheering on your execution when daddy government tells them it's for the greater good.
The idea of everyone following these guidelines is to protect the community as a whole. Everyone benefits the most if everyone complies with safety measures. If only one or a few people were wearing masks and staying home, then yeah, they pay a greater cost with less benefits to themselves. But if everyone does it, then everyone gets a greater benefit. It's a simple concept that I simply do not know why idiots like you cannot understand.
And while these people celebrate the imaginary light at the end of the COVID tunnel, those of us with 2 aluminum-free brain cells to rub together are focused on the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yeah, you have 2 brain cells, but only 2.
Several European countries have halted the administration of the AstraZeneca vaccine after reports of lethal blood clots. But don't worry about it, Canada won't be taking the same precautionary measures. I guess 1 death is 1 too many only applies to COVID and doesn't really apply to the COVID vaccine.
This statement here is a clear example on why you don't know anything about science and don't even try to understand science. I'm absolutely baffled. Did you even try to take science in middle school? Because your ignorance is pretty astounding. Insults aside, the AstraZeneca vaccine had a few cases where blood clotting was observed. This was done on what we call a phase 4 study, which occurs after a drug or vaccine is released to the public. And then you use statistical and AI models to map out the effects it has on the greater population. So technically, all the vaccines right now are in phase 4, but it's the same whenever a new drug is approved. Now, it's no doubt that the side effects that were not observed in phase 3 trials would surface during phase 4, and that is perfectly normal. So when we found a new case of blood clotting, it of course frightened a few government officials, which made them halt the distribution of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, it was a bit premature because you have to look at the statistics first and listen to what the data tells you, and that's what Canada did. Out of the tens of millions of doses administered, there were about 20 cases of blood clotting. That means the odds of it happening is incredibly low, similar to anaphylactic shock during any vaccine or drug treatments. Just like any medication, there are side effects, and there will always be a tiny percentage of the population that would have detrimental reactions. But the chances are so low you are much more likely to die from a lightning strike. Therefore, it is worth it, and even if you did have a reaction, patients are asked to stay in the hospital or pharmacy for a period of time, usually about 15 minutes, to see if there are any serious adverse events, and after that 15-minute period, you're good to go. The countries that decided to halt the AstraZeneca vaccine didn't necessarily do the wrong thing, but they also didn't look at the data closely. Canada, on the other hand, did do an analysis and determined it safe, which it is. Other countries are expected to resume, so yeah, you completely misunderstood the situation at hand. Go actually read the article you're citing, because it literally says, at this time there's no indication that the vaccine caused these events. The other article you cited even says, there's currently no indication that vaccination has caused these conditions. And then you can go look at the EMA report saying that they are reviewing all cases of thromboembolic events. If you're familiar with blood clotting mechanisms, the first we definitely would need to check is the series of thrombin and fibrinogen interactions. This statement was posted a while ago, so why don't we check in on the updates? Here's one published on March 18, which is actually a day before I recorded this video. It says the benefits still outweigh the risks, similar to what I said earlier about the chance being lower than a lightning strike. It also says the vaccine is not associated with an increased risk of thromboembolic events, but it may have some interactions with thrombocytopenia, although not confirmed. The EMA also published information for patients regarding this, warning that in a few exceptionally rare cases, you could have a blood clot. But again, I must emphasize that the experts agree that the benefits greatly outweigh the risks. So yeah, that's the full information you should be giving to your audience, but instead you'd rather just show a headline and falsely report the articles in a way that fits your propaganda. Typical conspiracy theorist style.
Now, when Health Canada was probed about this issue, they responded the way they always do, by simply saying, the benefits outweigh the risks. To put it into layman's terms, benefits means money, and risks means your death.
Allow me to translate that to non-idiot. Benefits mean the benefits that you get out of the vaccine, aka having an efficacy rate that significantly decreases your chances of not only contracting the virus, but also suffering from lower intensity of symptoms. Risk means the tiny chance you have the blood clot, which really only applies to people who have abnormal platelet count. Again, you are more likely to be struck by lightning.
Why do you think it is that Canada would dismiss these reports and refuse to do even as little as an investigation?
There is absolutely no way you just claim they didn't do an investigation, when they literally did. I'm actually starting to believe you don't actually know how to read.
Well, perhaps it has something to do with the Toronto Medical Officer of Health's bank account. Dr. Cruella DeVille's husband has financial ties to both AstraZeneca and Pfizer. Surprise, surprise. The Toronto Medical Officer of Health is profiting from 2 out of 3 of the toxic eggs in Canada's genocide basket.
I went ahead and read the article so regular people didn't have to waste their time. First of all, this comes from LifeSite News, which is a right-wing conspiracist news channel that has quite an infamous reputation. But regardless, it turns out that in the article, it doesn't give us any proof, evidence, or explanation on how the claim came about. All it says is, the woman who has kept a city of nearly 3 million people in one of the strictest government lockdowns of North America, Eileen de Villa, is married to a doctor with financial ties to 2 of the leading COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers. Oh, wonderful. So we're just supposed to take your word for it. And then the rest of the article just basically bashes on the lockdown decision. But even if I give you the unsubstantiated claim that it is true, the lockdowns have nothing to do with the vaccine. And even so, it's not like it's her decision on how many AstraZeneca vaccines to buy. My god, the conspiracy conspiracy theory is just so wild at this point. First, show us some evidence of your claim, then show us how it is negatively impacting Canadians after considering everything we just talked about regarding the AstraZeneca vaccine, of course.
And while we roll out millions of these AstraZeneca vaccines, there's another story circulating that hasn't garnered all that much attention. Not only are we currently preparing hospitals in Ontario for a third wave, we're also prepping for a much harsher lockdown than anything we've seen up until this point. Does anybody else find it odd that as we're rolling out the vaccine, we're simultaneously preparing for the worst of the pandemic? I mean, shouldn't we reasonably be expecting hospitalizations and infections to decline?
Another claim that shows you don't understand science or how pandemics work. Look, I'm not asking you to be an expert, but when you're an idiot and you pretend to be an expert, that's when we have a problem. This is why I always say to listen to the scientists, because they actually know what they're talking about. Now, let's break down the claim. Yes, a third wave is very possible, and many countries are already facing it as of the recording of this video. Because that's how pandemics work. That's how viral spread works. You have up and downs like a roller coaster because viruses infect in a positive feedback loop. That, combined with the population limits and the number of people immune due to infection, you get an oscillation where you have waves of infection. So it's no surprise that a third wave is striking and on the horizon. Now, depending on how you control the spread of COVID, you may or may not have a third wave. In other words, every wave is preventable, from the third to the second and even the first. But once the wave starts, it follows a predictable pattern that can be predicted by probabilistic models. So, where do vaccines come in? You can sort of see vaccines as being the same as someone infected. Remember when I said that immune people make up parts of the upper bound of the positive feedback infections? What you're essentially doing is increasing the number of people who have this immunity but did not suffer the symptoms. But symptoms is a different topic here. So you're lowering the ceilings. In other words, the waves will still come, and you can't use the slow rollout of vaccines as a method of stopping another spike from happening. But what it can do is flatten the wave so that it does not reach higher numbers, because the top of the spike is largely determined by the amount of people and the density of people who are still available to infect. So once you lower that, it also lowers the height of the wave. But can you stop the wave from happening at all? It will have some effect, but ultimately no. In other words, the general trend will decrease, but ups and downs will still exist. So what do we learn from here, everyone? Trust scientists, not some ignorant conspiracy theorist on the internet. Thank you to everyone for watching. Huge shout out to my patrons, Fireshard, Alan Morton, JN, and Miss Fixit. See you next week.